Most people think loving animals is simply a preference. Some people enjoy sports. Some people enjoy art. Some people enjoy traveling. And some people simply happen to love animals. At first glance, it seems no different from any other interest. But psychology has a habit of looking beneath the obvious. Whenever a preference becomes deeply emotional, it usually reflects something much larger happening inside the human mind. Why do some people instantly stop to help an injured bird while others walk past without noticing? Why can a few minutes spent with a dog erase the emotional weight of an entire day? Why do some people trust animals more easily than they trust other human beings? And why does losing an animal sometimes create grief that feels almost impossible to explain? The answers are far more fascinating than most people imagine. Because loving animals is rarely only about animals. It is often about the way people experience the world itself. Art of Thinking reminds us that every habit, every emotional connection, and every recurring choice reveals something about the architecture of the human mind. Nothing meaningful happens by accident. The books we read, the music that moves us, the places where we feel at peace, even the creatures we feel drawn toward. Each one reflects hidden psychological patterns quietly shaping our lives. Today, we explore one of those patterns. Not to claim that people who love animals are better than everyone else. Not to romanticize compassion. But to understand what psychology reveals about people whose hearts seem naturally drawn toward other living creatures. Because once you understand these patterns, you may discover that loving animals says far more about a person than words ever could. 1. They experience the world more deeply than most people realize. One of the strongest psychological characteristics shared by many animal lovers is heightened emotional sensitivity. Sensitivity is one of the most misunderstood traits in modern society. People often confuse it with weakness. They assume sensitive people are fragile, too emotional, too easily hurt. But psychology tells a very different story. Sensitivity simply means that the brain processes more emotional information. Small changes become noticeable. Tiny facial expressions carry meaning. A slight shift in someone's voice is immediately detected. The emotional atmosphere of a room becomes impossible to ignore. Sensitive people often notice suffering long before anyone else does. They recognize sadness hidden behind a smile, stress hidden behind confidence, loneliness hidden behind success. This ability can become an extraordinary gift. It allows deeper empathy, stronger intuition, greater emotional understanding. But every gift has its cost. Feeling more means carrying more. Cruelty feels heavier. Conflict feels louder. Emotional dishonesty becomes exhausting. Now imagine someone with this kind of nervous system spending time with an animal. Something remarkable happens. For perhaps the first time all day, they no longer need to decode complicated social signals. Animals do not hide behind carefully chosen words. They do not pretend to like someone for personal gain. They do not flatter, manipulate, or maintain social masks. Their emotions are expressed almost entirely through behavior. A dog's excitement is genuine. A horse's trust develops slowly but honestly. A rescued cat's affection cannot be forced. Everything feels real. For highly sensitive people, this emotional transparency creates enormous psychological relief. The brain finally stops analyzing hidden motives. Instead of asking, what are they really thinking? The mind simply experiences the relationship as it is. That feeling is surprisingly rare in modern life. Human relationships are often filled with uncertainty. Did they mean what they said? Why did they suddenly become distant? Were they being polite or sincere? Should I trust them? These invisible calculations consume tremendous mental energy. Animals remove much of that uncertainty. Their honesty creates emotional safety. Perhaps this explains why someone can spend an entire day surrounded by people and still feel emotionally drained. Yet after only 15 minutes playing with their dog, they suddenly feel lighter. Their problems have not disappeared. Their responsibilities remain exactly the same. But their nervous system has briefly stopped scanning for social danger. And sometimes, that small moment of peace changes everything. This sensitivity also explains something many people misunderstand. Animal lovers are often accused of caring too much. But from their perspective, caring less does not feel possible. Their emotional system simply refuses to ignore suffering. And this leads naturally to another hidden psychological trait. Their compassion often reaches far beyond the boundaries most people unconsciously place around it. 2. Their empathy is not limited by species. Most people define empathy as understanding another person's emotions. But genuine empathy goes much further. It begins with a much simpler question. Can another living being suffer? If the answer is yes, compassion naturally follows. For many animal lovers, this process happens almost automatically. A frightened puppy hiding beneath a parked car, a bird struggling with an injured wing, a neglected horse standing quietly behind a broken fence. These scenes trigger an emotional response almost instantly. Some people barely notice them. Others cannot stop thinking about them for days. Psychologists sometimes describe this as expanded empathic concern. Instead of limiting compassion only to members of their own social group, these individuals extend emotional care to other forms of life. Interestingly, this does not usually mean they care less about people. Quite the opposite. Many individuals deeply connected to animals also work in professions centered around helping others. Teachers, nurses, therapists, volunteers, social workers. Their compassion is simply broader. It flows wherever vulnerability exists. Research has repeatedly suggested that highly empathetic individuals find it extremely difficult to ignore visible suffering. Once they become aware of it, their brains continue processing it long afterward. This is why someone may rescue a single abandoned kitten and unexpectedly find themselves volunteering at shelters a year later. Compassion has a remarkable quality. The more we practice it, the stronger it becomes. Like a muscle, empathy grows through repeated use. Each act of kindness changes the way the brain sees the world. Helping slowly becomes part of identity. It is no longer something people choose to do. It becomes someone they naturally are. And yet empathy alone cannot explain why so many people describe animals as their greatest source of emotional comfort. To understand that, we must look at something even more fundamental: the universal human desire to be accepted exactly as we are. 3. They feel accepted without having to pretend. One of the quietest sources of emotional exhaustion is the feeling that you must constantly perform in order to be accepted. Modern life rewards presentation. People carefully choose what they post online. They rehearse conversations before important meetings. They suppress emotions that might make them appear weak. They smile when they are disappointed. They laugh when they feel uncomfortable. Over time, this constant adjustment creates an invisible burden. The mind begins asking a tiring question: who do I need to become so that other people will accept me? Animals never ask that question. They do not care about careers, status, wealth, appearance, popularity, or social influence. A dog does not love its owner more after a promotion. A cat does not become distant because someone lost a job. A rescued rabbit does not care whether its owner is admired or ignored by society. Their relationships are built upon something much simpler: presence, consistency, safety, trust. For people who have spent years feeling misunderstood, this kind of acceptance can feel almost unbelievable. Psychologists describe belonging as one of the deepest human needs. Not belonging because of achievement, not belonging because of perfection, simply belonging. Animals often satisfy that need in one of its purest forms. They respond to who someone is in everyday life, not to the image they project. This is why many people describe arriving home to their pet as the most peaceful moment of the day. The house has not changed. The bills still exist. The deadlines remain. But for a few moments, there is no pressure to impress anyone. There is no competition, no comparison, no expectation to become someone different. They can simply exist. And in today's world, that experience has become surprisingly rare. Perhaps this is one reason why relationships with animals often feel emotionally restorative. They remind people that love does not always have to be earned. Sometimes it is simply shared, and that realization quietly changes the way someone sees themselves. Yet acceptance is only one part of the story. There is another psychological force that often keeps animal lovers deeply connected to the creatures they care for. It is the extraordinary sense of purpose that grows through responsibility. 4. Caring gives their lives quiet meaning. There is a significant psychological difference between owning an animal and caring for one. Ownership focuses on possession. Care focuses on responsibility. Many devoted animal lovers rarely think in terms of ownership. Instead, they think in terms of protection. The question is never, what does this animal give me? The question becomes, what does this animal need today? That small shift transforms an ordinary relationship into something profoundly meaningful. Every morning begins with purpose. Food must be prepared. Water must be changed. Walks must happen regardless of the weather. Veterinary appointments cannot be ignored. Illness requires patience. Fear requires reassurance. Old age requires compassion. None of these responsibilities are glamorous. Many are inconvenient. Some are expensive. Others become emotionally painful. Yet most animal lovers willingly accept them. Why? Because responsibility creates meaning. Modern life often leaves people searching for significance. Many careers feel repetitive. Many achievements disappear almost immediately. One project ends. Another begins. One deadline passes. Another replaces it. The cycle continues endlessly. But caring for another living being creates visible impact every single day. A frightened animal slowly learns to trust again. A neglected pet regains its health. An anxious dog becomes confident. An abandoned kitten grows into a healthy adult. The caregiver witnesses these transformations with their own eyes. Psychology consistently shows that human beings are remarkably resilient when their struggles feel meaningful, meaning changes the emotional weight of effort. The work remains difficult, but it no longer feels empty. That is why many people who rescue animals describe the experience as life-changing. Not because every day becomes easier, but because every day becomes more meaningful. Responsibility quietly gives structure to life, and structure often becomes the foundation upon which emotional well-being is rebuilt. This leads us toward another fascinating pattern. Many people who love animals are not simply seeking companionship. They are seeking something that has become increasingly rare in modern society: authenticity. 5. They value authenticity more than appearances. Human relationships are beautifully complex, but they are also incredibly complicated. People often hide their true emotions. They say they are fine when they are overwhelmed. They offer compliments they do not fully mean. They avoid difficult conversations. They smile politely while secretly feeling hurt. Social life requires countless small performances. Sometimes those performances are necessary. Sometimes they protect relationships. But they also consume enormous emotional energy. Animals do not perform in the same way. Their emotional world is refreshingly direct. Fear looks like fear. Joy looks like joy. Curiosity looks like curiosity. Trust develops slowly, but once earned, it is expressed with remarkable honesty. This emotional transparency becomes deeply comforting for many people. There is no need to wonder whether affection is genuine. No need to decode hidden motives. No need to question whether kindness comes with invisible conditions. Everything feels wonderfully uncomplicated. Ironically, many people who deeply love animals are not withdrawing from humanity. They are simply searching for relationships where emotional honesty feels effortless. Psychologists often speak about cognitive load. Every decision, every uncertainty, every hidden social rule requires mental energy. Relationships filled with ambiguity demand constant interpretation. Animals remove much of that burden. Their presence encourages something modern people struggle to experience: the present moment. Watch a dog explore a park. It is fully engaged. Observe a cat resting in the afternoon sunlight. There is no anxiety about tomorrow. No regret about yesterday. Only complete attention to the present. Spending time with animals naturally invites people into that same state. Without realizing it, many begin breathing more slowly, thinking less, observing more. For a nervous system overwhelmed by modern life, this experience feels almost medicinal. Perhaps that is why some of the happiest moments people describe are surprisingly ordinary. Walking through the woods with a dog, watching birds early in the morning, sitting quietly while a cat sleeps nearby. Nothing extraordinary happens. Yet everything feels different, because peace rarely arrives through excitement. More often, it arrives through presence. And animals have mastered the art of being fully present. Still, beneath empathy, beneath acceptance, beneath authenticity, there is one final psychological truth that explains why the connection between humans and animals can become so extraordinarily powerful. That truth is not about the animals alone. It is about what those relationships quietly awaken inside ourselves. 6. They often heal by helping another life. There is a fascinating paradox in psychology. Many people spend years trying to find happiness by focusing entirely on themselves. They search for the perfect career, the perfect relationship, the perfect routine, the perfect version of themselves. Yet genuine healing often begins somewhere unexpected. It begins when attention shifts away from the self. This is one reason why caring for animals can be so psychologically powerful. When someone adopts a frightened rescue dog, their daily thoughts gradually change. Instead of asking, "How do I feel today?" they begin asking, "Has my dog eaten? Does she seem anxious? Why is he walking differently? How can I make today a little better for them?" Without realizing it, their mind slowly moves from constant self-monitoring toward meaningful caregiving. Psychologists sometimes describe this as restorative caregiving. Helping another living being interrupts cycles of excessive rumination. Many people struggling with loneliness or emotional pain spend enormous amounts of time trapped inside their own thoughts. The mind continuously replays old conversations, past regrets, future worries, imagined failures. Hour after hour, day after day, Animals gently interrupt this cycle. A dog wants to go outside. A cat asks for attention. A rabbit needs fresh food. Life continues moving. The present moment quietly calls. This simple shift can have remarkable effects on emotional well-being. Researchers have repeatedly found that meaningful caregiving often reduces feelings of isolation, increases daily structure, and creates a stronger sense of purpose. Of course, animals are not a substitute for professional mental health treatment. No responsible psychologist would suggest that, but they can become extraordinary companions throughout the healing process. They provide consistency, routine, physical affection, emotional stability. Perhaps most importantly, they offer something that many people quietly long for: the comforting feeling that someone is genuinely happy simply because you came home. For many individuals, that experience slowly rebuilds emotional resilience, not through dramatic breakthroughs, but through thousands of ordinary moments shared across months and years. Healing rarely arrives all at once. More often, it arrives quietly. One evoque, one gentle touch, one peaceful evening at a time. 7. The way they treat animals reflects the way they see life. There is an old idea in psychology that character becomes most visible when no reward is expected. Almost anyone can be polite to someone powerful. Almost anyone can be generous when recognition is guaranteed. But kindness shown toward those who cannot offer status or advantage reveals something much deeper. Animals cannot improve someone's career. They cannot increase social influence. They cannot provide financial opportunities. They cannot flatter the ego in the way human admiration sometimes can. When someone consistently chooses kindness toward animals, the motivation is often remarkably pure. It comes from values rather than rewards. That does not mean every animal lover is automatically compassionate in every situation. Human beings are always more complicated than simple labels. Some people adore pets, yet struggle with human relationships. Others deeply care for both. Psychology rarely deals in absolutes. Instead, it looks for recurring patterns. And one pattern appears repeatedly. People who love animals often hold a worldview centered around protection rather than domination. They instinctively notice vulnerability. They feel uncomfortable with unnecessary cruelty. They believe strength should include gentleness. These values often extend beyond animals. They influence parenting, friendships, romantic relationships, leadership, even the way people speak to strangers. Because compassion is rarely selective, once it becomes part of identity, it naturally spreads into other areas of life. This may explain why so many animal lovers describe rescuing an animal as one of the most meaningful experiences they have ever had. They are not simply changing another life. They are expressing the deepest values they hold about their own. Every act of care quietly answers an important psychological question: who am I when no one is watching? For many people, the answer is found in the simple decision to protect a creature that cannot protect itself. And perhaps that answer says more about character than any achievement ever could. 8. What loving animals really reveals about the human mind. So what does psychology actually tell us about people who love animals? It does not tell us that they are perfect. It does not suggest they are morally superior. And it certainly does not imply that everyone should experience emotions in exactly the same way. Human personality is far too complex for simple conclusions. But psychology does reveal something remarkably consistent. People who form deep emotional bonds with animals often value connection over appearance, authenticity over performance, compassion over convenience, responsibility over control, presence over constant distraction. Perhaps this is why animals occupy such a unique place in human history. For thousands of years, they have walked beside us, not because they speak our language, but because they communicate something even older than language: trust, loyalty, curiosity, playfulness, comfort, and unconditional presence. In many ways, animals quietly remind us of qualities that modern life sometimes encourages us to forget. They remind us to slow down, to notice small moments, to appreciate simple joys, to care without expecting immediate rewards, to remain loyal when life becomes difficult, to offer comfort even when words are unnecessary. Maybe that is the deepest lesson hidden within the psychology of animal lovers. The relationship is never only about the animal. It becomes a mirror reflecting patience, empathy, responsibility, kindness, and the extraordinary human capacity to care for another life simply because it exists. Art of Thinking reminds us that understanding ourselves often begins by paying attention to the relationships we build. Every meaningful connection tells a story, not only about the one we love, but about the person we are becoming. If today's exploration helped you see animal lovers through a new psychological lens, We'd love to hear your thoughts. Have animals ever changed your life? Have you ever felt understood by an animal in a way that words could never fully explain? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. And if you enjoy exploring the hidden patterns behind human behavior, consider subscribing and joining our growing community. Every week, we uncover another layer of the human mind through psychology, philosophy, and thoughtful reflection. In our next video, we'll explore a question that is even more personal. Today, we examine the psychology of people who love animals. But loving animals is not exactly the same as loving a pet that becomes part of your family. Why do so many people describe their dog or cat as their child? Why can losing a pet create grief that feels just as deep as losing a close relative? Why do companion animals become such powerful sources of emotional security, identity, and unconditional love? The psychology behind those questions is surprisingly profound, and it reveals another hidden side of what it truly means to be human. So if you don't want to miss the hidden psychology of people who love pets, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us for the next journey. Because sometimes, by understanding the lives of the creatures we love, we end up understanding ourselves more deeply than we ever imagined.